Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and today we are thrilled to welcome a very entertaining person. He's a dentist by day, comedian by night, and author of the fascinating book, Dad Spelled Backward, A Journey Through the Maze of Love, Marriage, and Adoption. Please help us welcome Michael King. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan and Ike. I appreciate it.
Well, to start with, I was reading your bio, and this was fascinating to me. You grew up in Denver, and your dad, Sid King, owned the Crazy Horse Bar and became something of a celebrity because of it. So for those who don't know, can you tell us what the Crazy Horse Bar was and what made it and your dad so popular?
Well, the Crazy Horse Bar was a burlesque house, for better words, a strip joint in Denver, Colorado. And what made him unique was, first of all, my mom worked there. It was a family business, and she came from an Orthodox Jewish background. And as my dad said, it was the biggest strip joint west of the Mississippi. I don't know what was east. I never looked it up. I should look it up. But he was unique in the sense that he was the MC and the host. He was very generous, gregarious. He made it fun, and he used a lot of Yiddish words. He didn't call them breasts; he called them sitzkas, and he was, he'd hand out little gifts to the people in the audience. The audience was probably 60-40 men to women. I mean, it was pretty even. Because he treated all his guests so well, and he made them feel very much at home, and he made it fun. And his motto was, anybody can be a stripper. It didn't matter, if they were svelte or this or that. It didn't matter. To him, it was entertaining, and it was for people to have a good time and escape what was going on.
Yeah, we're not talking about these seedy strip joints like,
No, you're not talking about.
Yes.
You're talking about lines around the corner. Every Denver Jew has probably been in there multiple times, even though some of them wouldn't admit it. So anybody over 50 or in Denver would certainly know the place. And it became very popular. It's even featured in the Colorado Museum. There's a whole Sid King corner.
Wow. Oh my God. Well, as you said, it was a family business. So how did you feel about that growing up?
Well, that's, coincidentally, as you probably know, we're doing a musical called The Lap Dance Kid or Lap Dance Kid. And it started as about 12 years ago as a two-person play. It was myself and Shirley, the dental assistant / stripper. And it was about being a dentist, a stand-up comedian, and having a father who was the czar of striptease. And then it evolved during COVID. We started writing music for it. And we already did it at 54 Below, and we're doing it again in April. And then hopefully we'll get a run off Broadway somewhere, off maybe New Zealand or somewhere. I don't care. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, reading about you, I saw that there were some funny stories that happened in Crazy Horse Bar. Normally, I'd be hesitant to ask about a snake story when it involved a strip club, but this didn't sound like we need to change, the rating of the show. No. Can you tell us about that?
Well, all right. So my dad would try anything in terms of. He knew about the history of stripping and, how far back it goes to, I don't know, Sodom and Gomorrah, it goes way back. So he would, so one day he comes home and he has a bandage on his hand and he had 3 or 4 strippers. Now, I'll try to put this out to your audience. guarantee you there's very few people whose father has been bitten the hand by a boa constrictor,
Right.
or maybe it was a king snake. I don't know. But the snake turned on one of the dancers on the stage, and my dad, doing his Tarzan act, ran up there, and the snake bit him in the hand.
Oh my.
And I don't know, maybe the snake was against stripping or culturally more conservative. I don't know. But anyway, he bit her, and he had to go to the hospital and get a few stitches where the snake.
Wow.
Luckily, it wasn't venomous.
Yes.
Well, yeah. That makes perfect sense. Well, we saw that Clint Eastwood filmed part of Every Which Way But Loose at the bar. Did you get to meet him, see the shoot? And are there any
I think I was somewhere away at the time, but no, supposedly him and my dad became good friends for that brief moment. I think they closed the place for a day or two to do the shoot. And then, that one scene of my dad at the bar with the orangutan. Well, I think it's Clint Eastwood, the orangutan, and my dad. I think that's the order. I think the orangutan had more lines than my dad.
Than your dad did? I love that movie. It was a really fun movie.
That was a class. Yeah, it was fun. It was, and then if you look at the clip, you could see outside, talk about retro, how the cars and, the parking meters and I think it was, I guess during the 70s, is that when?
Yeah.
I think it was shot. Yeah, it was a big deal for him.
Of course. Well, going back to you now. So you growing up, you had your dad, doing this entertaining and telling jokes. Were you a funny kid yourself growing up?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we're a very short family, and I think a lot of humor comes from that. I think my dad was barely 5'2.5", maybe.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Oh. And my mom was 5'1". My sister's 5. I was pretty close to 5'7". I mean, I was tall. They called me Stretch. That's how. That's how little we were. And I think for me, being short sometimes creates, I never felt insecure that much, but I think being short creates some insecurity. And for me, maybe because my dad was center of attention, and so I wanted that also. But I think being short, you try to maybe compensate. You're not going to be the football hero or something. So I think being humorous, laughing, being the class clown. And I was probably the class clown.
Sure. Well, at what point growing up did the bug strike you that you wanted to perform as well? I mean, were you in any shows at school or anything like that?
No, I didn't do anything like that. I don't know. I think it was just, I didn't want to. At some point, I thought of going in my father's business. Sid King and Son, Crazy Horse Bar, but. Fortunately or unfortunately, we had a lot of doctors on my mom's side of the family. And so I kind of went that route, but then it kind of wasn't creative enough for me. So I thought I didn't have initially the bug to do stand-up, but I think in the back of my mind, it was always there. And then when I moved to New York.
Your parents kind of steer you into dentistry? Is that what you're?
That's what I'm saying. I heard this voice in my ear, drill teeth, make money. I was hoping it was God, but it sounded more like my mother.
It's so crazy because I think about dentistry, period, and I think, what prompts someone to choose that? I mean, what was it about specifically dentistry that
it's not
drew
so much
you in?
about dentistry. I think for my generation, and I think, you paid a lawyer, a dentist, a doctor, that there wasn't hedge funds particularly. A lot of Jews weren't going into banking at the time. So that was kind of the culture. I think for me and for a lot of people, you applied to medical school. That was probably number one. And you always applied to dental school as a backup. Now it's kind of on par. I think they're just pretty much equally hard to get into. But back then you applied to medical school and then you applied to dental school, and dentistry was a backup. I think I got on a waiting list at a medical school, Howard University. I would have been the token white guy there at the time. And then there was dentistry, and I got into dental school, a really good dental school, and so I didn't want to wait around. A lot of guys waited around. They went to Bologna or other countries to become a doctor, and I didn't care that much, obviously. So it worked out better for me for dentistry.
I'm curious. You started working in my hometown of Brooklyn. Just where around?
It was Brooklyn Jewish Hospital. I don't know if you've heard of it. I think there was a book about the place called The Last Angry Man. I never read it. I think it's condos.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So it was a 2-year residency. My first experience there, I drove out. I had a little Volkswagen. I was going to the hospital, and this is back in probably early 80s, late 70s. And I'm sitting at the street corner like this, just kind of daydreaming, little naive boy from Colorado, and I'm like this. And then I kind of felt my arm do this. And I said, I don't think I did that on purpose. And there was a guy standing there holding my watch.
Oh,
looking at me. It was a gold color watch, but I think it was a Timex. And, didn't know what he got. And he looked at me for a minute and then ran off. And here I was in Brooklyn, New York.
That sounds like Brooklyn.
Right.
That sounds like my growing up area.
Right.
Your story reminds me a little bit of the musical. Bells Are Ringing. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I've heard of it.
Bells Are Ringing. It's the dentist who wanted to write songs. That was one of the characters.
Okay.
So it's like, working as a dentist, you never really lost the bug to perform. So I was reading that you incorporated comedy into your practice.
Yeah. Well, for the kids, we would do magic tricks. We do kids jokes. You've heard, what time is it in the dental office? 2:30. Be true to your teeth or be false to you, like kind of silly jokes. And, we would do things to make it very animated. We blow up their hand in a balloon while their hand, they put, the dental glove and put it on and blow it up. And, we do all kinds of stuff. The office is it's cultured for kids. There's little figures hanging from the ceiling. It's a great place. And the child doesn't feel apprehensive. So I would entertain the kids, not so much the parents, because if you got the kids hooked and love coming to the dentist, and that was our whole theme, fun at the dentist's office. We have this little bracelet. I'm not wearing it coincidentally. It says the thrill of the drill. So after we do a filling, we give the kids one of these.
What are the postcards that you mentioned on your site?
Oh yeah, we have. We must have 30 of them. Have I been practicing that long? Yeah. So every year we would come out with these postcards, these humorous postcards. Like there was one Jacques Cousteau where I was posed with I had this molar hat constructed. It went over my head with a scuba tank in the gear. And I went to a studio and, I had the flippers on. And another one was Molar Lisa. We did 1 and 2 of those because one year I ran out of ideas. This year, what do we this year? Yeah, this year we did, I'll send you one. I think please. This year is molar power, where I'm standing in front of a whole array of solar panels. I mean, they go on for a mile, and I'm holding, and there's a cord connected to them, and I'm holding an electric toothbrush. So, and people collect these, believe it or not.
That's what I was reading, that they become collectors items.
Yeah, we send out about 1,200.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean, obviously through all that, you were still creating material, but were you simultaneously working on comedic material just in case
Yeah, well, I would always do, I started at Catch a Rising Star, which was, that was the Improv and Catch a Rising Star when I first started. And luckily, through my dentistry, I knew a woman who was an agent. She would book David Brenner and at William Morris Agency. And she introduced me to Rick Newman, who's since sadly passed away, who was the owner of Catch a Rising Star. And I didn't have to audition, let the dentist in, go up there. And I did my first joke. I got a laugh, and then I died the rest of the show.
Oh, no.
But I continued, that was when, Richard Belzer would come in and do 45 minutes and bump everybody. And, Bill Maher was there, and Larry David, and, Seinfeld, I wasn't that friendly with, and, Paul Reiser, and a lot of guys at the time were coming up. They were a couple of years ahead of me, but they were coming up at the time. So that's where I was hanging out every night, writing jokes, and because, you write what you know. So dentistry became a lot part of my act.
So was there anything that just like, while you would, practicing dentistry, that just, this is the point that I have to go ahead and try comedy? I mean, was there some spur of the moment type thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So what happened was, there was a point in the, I think, early 90s, I had sold a screenplay to David Steinberg, not David Steinberg, I'll think of his name in a second. Norman Lear's cousin, David Susskind.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I sold, you could tell we're in, so I sold the screenplay to David Susskind. I was working on a sitcom called The Eligible Dentist.
We're going to ask you about that one. Yes.
Yeah. So David Seltzer, who was, I think his first name is David, who wrote The Omen, was friend with Gene Wilder, and they were, Gene Wilder, I think Gilda recently passed away. So he's trying to get a project going for him to get him out of his funk. And so he had The Eligible Dentist. And so he heard I was doing a lot of stand-up and hired me as a consultant. And I had an agent with CAA. And so about, a temporary agent. So about that time, I thought it was time, blank or get off the pot. Do I, go to LA and try, or do I stay and do both things, which I love both things. So it wasn't that hard of a decision. I like being in control of my environment and being the boss, but at the same time, all the variables in the entertainment business. Both you guys are aware of that. So.
Yeah. Well, back to Catch a Rising Star. How long did it take you to start catching on and making a buzz for yourself in the comedy circuit?
I don't know if I had a buzz, more of a whisper, maybe a hum. I had a little hum. No, I think it takes, about 4 years before you get for me, a decent 20 minutes. I was always known as the dentist. I mean, you can look at there's a documentary called Behind the Brick Wall. It's about the Improv and how it started in New York. And one of the first people on that is Bill Maher. And they're talking about, the good old days. I don't know if you know Bill, but he can. So he was going, everybody was performing back there. I had to wait in line behind the friggin', didn't use those words, behind the friggin' dentist.
That's you.
And then there's another line in that same documentary where Jon Stewart's in an elevator with a couple other comedians, and they're talking about Mike King, and John says, "You mean Mike King the dentist or Michael Patrick from Sex and the City?" Because we were both performing about the same time.
Now, I'm curious though, did your first act was like really like dentist jokes, and as your act changed?
I mean, the first joke I ever wrote was I saw this guy being mugged on the street. He was an out-of-town businessman. I knew he was an out-of-town businessman because he asked for a receipt. That was the first joke I ever wrote. got a laugh. And from then it died. Yeah, I started I was a prop comic. I used to use a lot of prop because a clutch, and a crutch, I should say. And everybody kind of, oh, you don't use props, but I have one prop that people still remember when they see me. You're the guy with the big shoes, because the prop was, I said, my apartment was broken into 3 times in 1 month when I moved to New York City, and I couldn't afford a burglar alarm. So I've never been robbed since then. Instead of locking the door of my apartment, I leave these outside the front door, and I take out of his bag size 18 sneakers. I mean, these things. And I said, if you thought this guy was home, would you break in? No, you wouldn't even come. And that got a huge laugh. And so if you end with a huge laugh, all the other stuff kind of swept under the carpet, so to speak.
Well, I was reading also that you opened for Ray Romano. How'd that come about? And
well, Ray and I were friends. We started together at Dangerfields in the 80s. And, we became friends. I would call him often to do gigs with me. I visited him when he was on his show, but, you kind of go separate paths. We don't speak anymore, but we were friendly. And, I got several gigs for him, and we did many gigs together on the road. And, back then it was like, I remember we booked one gig, and I think I was getting $275, and Ray wanted was getting $275, and he said, "Hey, my kid, get a little more." And I think I got him $4.25, and he was really happy with that. But I don't think he'd do it for $4.25 anymore.
No, probably not.
Well, back to your screenplay writing, you just sort of casually throw out you sold a screenplay, which is like, the dream of everybody in Hollywood. I don't care who you are. So how did that come about for you?
Well, as you know, it's all connections. Well, and, I was a single dentist living in New York City, so I was dating a lot. Suddenly you become a dentist, and for whatever reason, you get respect that you never had. You tell women you're a comic and it's F you, and you tell women you're a dentist, it's F me. It changes rather quickly. So at first I would tell them I was a dentist, but I think, what happened is, I was dating somebody, and she was working, she knew David Suskind's daughter, and she knew he was looking for screenplays. And I wrote this screenplay called Supermarket, which was a period screenplay about the 70 bag boys and about their adventures. Remember the bag boys when, you buy the groceries, and these were, 16-year-old kids, and he loved it. And he bought it, and I ended up writing a couple drafts. I got in the Writers Guild East, and that was a great experience. The money was great. As you know, it's one thing selling a screenplay, which is extremely difficult, but the next thing to get it made. And then the second screenplay was in development with New Line Cinema, and that was a topic I knew well about sexual obsession. And maybe all of us know it in some form or another. Where
they selected yours out of over 100.
There was like 100 or 200, and they selected mine to develop with. I think the guy was Bob Shea. I don't know if he's still head of it or. And so we develop it, and that one, I didn't really get much money, but it got really far along. I mean, it got, they even had a director. They had a producer that produced Accidental Tourists. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yep.
And, for some reason, and they gave the director, actually, his name was Juan Campanella, without throwing out a lot of names. So about 10 years, maybe 12 years ago, and this guy I wrote with in his little apartment, And I thought, the guy was okay. He wasn't a comedian, but he won this award for his student film at NYU. So he was considered a big deal. He had a development. He was signed by William Morris. And so they wanted to get him a project. And, this movie was going to be budgeted, I guess, at a couple $1 million so Juan and I were working on the script together for a year in his little apartment. So like I said, like 12 years ago, I'm watching the Academy Awards, and Juan happened to be from South America. And you could look it up. So who gets the Best Picture Award, Academy Award? Juan Campanella.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
And it shows you how life is all smoke and mirrors, because you're working with this guy. Yeah, he's good, but I'm pretty decent myself, and smoke and mirrors.
Oh my God. Well, when you win something like that, not the Oscar, but the contest, or the application, how much does that change your life, or do you start getting on other people's radar?
No, I didn't. Well, I think, like anything, maybe they respect you a little more. They look twice instead of glancing away. But sure, if it got made and, was successful, but I guess it gave me a little more credibility. You can't walk around and say, I almost had two movies made.
Yeah.
You did. It's cool, but it doesn't make you fulfilled or change your life, as you know. But it's cool. I mean, because a lot of times you think if you had this, your life would change. People think, oh, if they had a little money, my life, and we all know, it gives you something, but it's not going to in the end make you fulfilled. That goes much deeper than that. I mean, it's great. It's a great experience. I remember sitting with my dad. When I sold the screenplay, sitting with my dad, and I'll never forget how, certain moments in your life stand out. So here's my dad, and he's from that generation where money equals respect. The rich man had more access. So we're sitting at a restaurant, and he's, he had a raspy voice. And I said, Dad, I sold a screenplay. Yeah, really? Yeah, that's great. He probably thought I got $12. And yeah, and I said, Dad, I got over $50,000. And his mouth, the jaw, the food came out of his mouth. He's sitting there going, what? And so I think that's the first time, the stand-up or associating with the entertainment business really caught his attention.
Wow. Well, I was looking, you already mentioned one of the names. I'm looking at some of the names you interacted with. Amazing. So you first Larry David. So tell us about your interaction with him. And
well, Larry David, I didn't know well. I mean, other than Larry David was always at the bar at Catch a Rising Star playing chess with Ronnie Shakes. Now, Ronnie Shakes, you can look him up. He's one of my favorite comedians at the time. Ronnie was great. We were friendly. His family owned a restaurant, I think it was called Shakely or something like that in the Wall Street area. Really a nice guy and a great writer, a great comedian. And I love Ronnie. He was friendly with Larry. So through Ronnie, I would see Larry at the bar all the time. Unfortunately, Ronnie passed away in his early 40s and very sad. But he had already did a couple Tonight shows. And so I didn't have that much reaction with Larry at the time, but through a writing partner, his name is D.F. Sweetler. My daughter calls him Uncle D. We were watching Seinfeld, and I said, we should write a spec script. And we wrote a spec script. It was about the corner newspaper man passed away. And I don't remember his name. I don't know. It's probably not politically correct now to even, but who knows what is. And so he passed away. And so the group of them were thinking of going, to the funeral. And, one of the characters said, yeah, I love funerals. It's a great place to meet women. And this was, back in the early 90s, and it was a great screenplay. So we send it to Larry David, and this is during, the middle of Seinfeld, the biggest sitcom around. And apparently Larry read it on a Friday and got back to us like on a Sunday and said he really loved the spec script. So we're going, we're in, this is going to happen. So he said, you come up with 3 ideas, 3 different storylines, because, they had multiple storylines.
Yeah.
So you come up with 3 storylines, we'll give you a script. Because I think with Writers Guild, you had to assign so many scripts to outside writers. So we send it, and we were working for over a year submitting ideas to Larry. And he would get back to us. He said, no, it's too similar. It's too similar. So we knew we could write for the show because we had the script down and we had similar ideas. And, one idea was Elaine went out with a friend of hers, and her 5 or 6-year-old kid was still breastfeeding. And he liked that idea. And he said, all right, you come up with 2 more, we'll give you an assignment. And then, I don't know, another idea we had was, we had great ideas. Another idea was that, Jerry was walking around and he had this shirt he really liked, and he thought it was a unique shirt. And then he sees some other guy wearing it. And he didn't realize that the dry cleaner was wearing his clothes. And then he said, and we were asking other comics, and we thought we had a script for sure. Again, if you read the spec script, you would think for sure this was used on the show. And so that was our experience with them. It was close.
Wow.
Well, a lot of close calls in this business, as you know.
Oh, I know. See, the thing is, like, so few people know this, but I knew writers in Hollywood that made a career out of selling screenplays that never got made. They never had anything ever get made, yet they had really great careers. And it's just, it's so crazy to think about that, because the volume of material, people just can't, they can't comprehend it, and but anyway, back to something you worked on that did get made, the pilot, The Eligible Dentist. So you're working with Gene Wilder and Joe Claiborne. How did that come about that you became a consultant on a show?
Okay. Well, again, David Seltzer heard about me. Let me tell you what happened. So they called me, and I had a lot of ideas, but I didn't want to give them all at once because I didn't.
Right, sure.
And Don McHenry, who I knew, and there was another guy, Bob Shaw, who I sort of knew, who incidentally is supposed to be Larry David's favorite comedian. I'm not sure that's true. So Bob was very funny. Don McHenry was very funny. And they both wrote Hercules. And they got hired as writers for the show. And so they bring me in. I'll never forget, I got $500 for the day. And they bring me in, and there's all these little young kids that are 20 years my junior, suddenly have all this experience. My mom would call them a lot of little pishers. What are these pishers doing here? They don't know anything. And so they're squeezing me for all these ideas. And, I gave them a lot of great ideas. And at the end of the day, I heard they hated it. And these would have worked, but they didn't listen, or maybe they did. It never aired. They did 2 episodes.
Wow.
And it died a quick death.
Oh,
and I think it's because they didn't listen to my.
Well, that's exactly it. Yes. But is there like a part of you, that this kid from Denver, like, looking around, I'm on the same set as Gene Wilder or Carol Kane. That's mind blowing.
I think it was, but it was a gradual process. Yeah, it was a little mind blowing. Even talking to David Susskind, who, as you know, had one of the seminal talk shows of all time. He had that one thing with, I think it was Carl Reiner or Mel Brooks. It's an extremely famous episode. I don't know if you've ever seen it. When I used to go to him, here's a guy that I saw as a little kid, and suddenly I'm going to his house to work on our screenplay.
Right.
And that was totally, I didn't feel relaxed. I felt like I was going to, a urologist for my exam or something. It was very nerve-wracking. I could never quite relax. Yeah, I think it's a bit intimidating. But again, that's where the smoke and mirrors come in, because the more you do this and the more you're exposed to this kind of thing, you realize, yeah, it's what it is. It's just, again, it's not going to, change things deeply within you, but it's interesting. Sure, I rather experience to know than not. It's like when I was dating, oh, if I could just go out with her, if I could just go with her and or that person. And then when you actually go out with them, you go, it's okay, but now I want to go out with her.
Right.
Well, tell us a little bit about your production company and some of the projects you've got going on.
Oh yeah, well, we did several projects, not in a few years. The one we're working on now is Lap Dance Kid, which I think the music is wonderful. I mean, you could see there's a guy, J.J. Neiman, who has a lot of, a couple million followers. I think he's on Back to the Future. I think he's one of the stand-ins or the co-stars now. He's singing one of the songs, In My Bones, which is about a kid who's obviously little Mikey, me. And the music is great. It's his first time at a strip show, and he's 12 years old, almost bar mitzvahed, and he sees these women dancing in front of him. So it's called In My Bones. It's a wonderful song. So, what I was working on, we did My Friends Think I'm Funny. We did a pilot for that. It was about people who, you meet people and everybody's, you should be a stand-up. You should do this. You should do that. And this was about people bringing their friends and working with professional comics to teach them a 2 or 3 minute set, and to go up in front of an audience to see if they could really be funny, if they really had the juice to work on an audience of strangers, because it's different. And that was when we worked on. There was a couple others, but we're really proud of them. We entered some contests, we won, but there's 9 million contests out there. I think just to send them the money, you get a certificate that you're a winner.
Well, want to talk about your book with the one behind me, Dad Spelled Backward. I went through it last week, and it has a lot of humor in it, but it also has to deal with some really serious subject matters. So tell us about the book and what made you decide to write it.
Well, I loved writing, and as everybody says, write what you know about. And we adopted our daughter in 2010, and about 2 years later, I was looking at my diary and I said, this is an important story. It's a love story, is what essentially is. But for people to know how important it is, if you're thinking about having a kid, any relationship you have with a child, that to me it was I never experienced a love like that. And it was almost instantaneous. And I wanted people to know how important it is, the love of a child. And whether it's your own or your nieces or your nephews, to establish a relationship with that child, because it will change your life.
Well, with these type of things, I'm always curious. Now, there's a lot about your wife in there as well in the book, of course. Was she on board to share all your experiences? Because there, like I said, there's a lot of personal details and emotions. Or did she have to be convinced somewhat to include it?
Yeah, I don't think she's completed the book yet.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it is so emotional.
Yeah.
I think she was okay with it. I changed a lot of the names around and some of the locations because, the story is all true, but because it's so personal. Yeah, it's tough because you're really opening yourself to who you really are. Because the loss that you experience, or that we experienced in this love story, was tremendous, and it makes you feel so vulnerable. But I think in the end, she understands how important it was. I mean, all the proceeds are going to charity to help, or certain charities to help other people who are thinking of adopting or foster care or whatever, to get them some money to make it easier process, because it is so expensive. But she knew I was writing it. I don't think she really knew it would get to that extent. It took me years to complete because it was so emotional. I'd get writing and I would write. I would break out in tears.
Oh, well, it's definitely a fine line. There's a balance there, and I think you handled it very well. And like I said before, just injecting some levity, I guess, in a lot of very serious matter, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Being Jewish, aren't we supposed to do that a lot?
Yes. Exactly.
I mean,
I think we count on that, actually.
Right. Yeah. So even in the most dire situations, we try to bring humor into it. And I think that, you had to look at it, at some point, because, the one mom who, was the main antagonist, the grandmother of the mother of the birth woman, or the birth mom. You have to have a sense of humor, because it is tough, and it went on for years and years, and to roll up your sleeves and continue, I mean, it takes a lot of strength to do that.
Well, what were some of the most surprising things that you learned during the adoption process?
Well, first, how expensive it is.
Wow.
You not only have an adoption lawyer, you have a facilitator who's also a lawyer. And, we're at that time, 2008, 9, 10, we were paying, the lawyer would get a few $100s an hour. The facilitator would get a few $100s an hour. And then the facilitator's job was to put ads in the newspapers, but all these little papers like the Penny Savers, where potential moms would be reading, and so those were, as I said in the book, about $8,000 every time you would do that. And you would maybe doing this every 6 to 8 weeks. And so I was surprised to learn the expense. Also, I was surprised because initially I wasn't on the fence for all of this. I mean, I was sitting in our apartment one day and we're starting the adoption process. For whatever reason, we tried other methods, and certain things my wife didn't want to do. She wanted to go where the need was the greatest, and she figured we go with adoption. So I remember sitting on the couch looking around, and I said, we have a neat apartment. Our life is really good. We're making a little money. We're traveling. Why do we need all kids crap laying around? You're going to have this, that, you're going to have diapers everywhere. And the realization was that matters in the least. You want to see more crap, because once you have that child, you want to be connected to that child in every way. And you want that child to be part of your life in every room. And so I think that to me was the biggest realization, how the ego gets into that and how you can feel selfish, but all that vanishes once there's going to be a child in your life.
Sure. Well, in your book, you mentioned that like everyone's journey is different in this, but so is there any advice you could give to someone going through the process now?
Be patient, and persevere. It can take a long time. Sometimes people get lucky. I've heard of stories where, the first time around, you got a child in a few months, but I think that's more of the exception than the rule. Sometimes it could take a year or two. For us, it took, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. It just was endless. But persevere and know in the end that you're going to experience something that you'll never know without completing this.
Enjoy.
Well, on the other side of the token, what advice would you give someone looking to break into stand-up?
Man, love the process. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't look at it as, I'm going to make a fortune. I'm going to become famous. People are going to look at me, because that's the least important, I think. I think people who experience, you look at all the tragedies in the entertainment business, because they get caught up in the ego thing, and they get caught up, people are recognizing them. But then once you're in that position, you realize you're the same schmuck inside. You're the same idiot you always been, and things didn't change. And unless you're mature, get to that level, you're going to realize that, so my advice is enjoy the process, enjoy the creativity, enjoy the artistic element of performing, and love what you do, and love the audience. You're giving them love, and they're going to give it back to you. And if you just think about that and you continue to love doing it, then you should do it forever, regardless of if you become famous or you work at every little joint in Jersey, which I have.
Well, what are you personally working on next?
We're working on The Lap Dance Kid.
That's what they want to do.
And then, I have a few books beside this one. I have some children's books. And the next one coming out is called, there's a lot of Yiddish in it. It's called Schmutzmouth. And it's a really cute book. It's not so much about your teeth. Brushing your teeth is important, but it's more about being a mensch. It's for children and people and even adults to do the right thing,
And when's that coming out?
Right. That's probably come out in late spring, early summer. These things are always delayed, so it takes forever. A lot of children,
I know, I'm well aware.
If there are 1,000 words, it could take you, years to get that out.
Well, I said nothing moves as glacial as at a glacial pace as the publishing industry.
Oh yes,
So
it's crazy, right?
Yes, very aware of that. Now, how can people follow you on social media?
They can go to MikeKingWrites.com. The Fifth Dentist, spelled out THEFIFTH dentist. Like 4 out of 5 dentists recommend sugarless gum. And then at the end, lapdancekid.com. You can look for, I think our next show at Studio 54 Below is be April 27th.
So when would you find out if this is going to be off Broadway or not, a show?
As soon as can we borrow some money?
Well, whoever's watching this, if they want, go to Mike's website.
This is it. I don't even know what this cost over 12 years, but I don't even want to think about it. But you don't want it to be a vanity project. At some point, you want to get other investors involved.
Sure.
And I think it's a great musical, and it's very heartfelt, and it's fun, and it's all about acceptance.
I hope we get to see it there. I definitely recommend everyone read this book, Dad Spelled Backward. It's a fascinating book, and like I said, there is a lot of humor in it. For it's a very delicate subject, but there's also like a lot of humor that helps it along, injected. Mike, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing all your stories with us. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Ike. You've been great. Thank you for asking all the questions, and thank you for letting me speak and give me the time.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Well, again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Ike Eisenmann, and a very special thanks to Mike King. And please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.